Hi and welcome to this tutorial. It's a tutorial on the RealmCrafter demo game, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how you can expand the actual demo game and create your own gameplay, create your own zones, and start working with the RealmCrafter game engine so you gradually can expand the demo game into something much more bigger and into something that you create. So we are going to look at how you can expand the existing demo game and start making your own game. For that we're going to create a zone, and we're going to work in the game editor and looking at what portals are, how actors are placed, and how to place NPCs and so on. But let's get started. First thing we look at is all programs, and in the folder RealmCrafter demo you have some folders that are being installed when you install the game. Now the game itself is run from in here, from the game server and the game client. We're not going to touch that now. What we're going to do now is going into the toolbox editors, and the first one we're going to look at is the terrain editor. Just going to fire this one up. Now the terrain editor is, well, self-explanatory. It's for editing terrains, and what we want to do is we want to make a terrain and we want to make a zone, and for that of course we need a terrain. Now if I press space and I move the mouse, I move up and down and around. If I left click the mouse button, I zoom in, and if I right click, I zoom out. Now this is going fairly fast, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the camera speed and turn it all the way down. So now it's a bit more humane, and for older people like me it's much more easier to navigate this way. So this terrain is not very big, and it's just a little square, and as we can see, the Vikings were right, the world is flat. So what we're going to do is we're going to expand it. We're going to scale it up a bit in the edit and scale up once, twice, 3 times a lady, 4, 5, 6. That's it. It's a bit bigger now. Okay, no reason why we shouldn't scale up a bit more. Let's just 7, 8, 9, 10 times. Let's just make it 10 times. Okay. So now we have the plane where our world is going to be, and the first thing we're going to do is start crafting a world. Now before we start crafting a world, planning is always essential. It's good to know what do we want in our zone. Do we want to have a forest, or do we want to have a lake? Do we want to have a river? What kind of world are you creating? I mean, a good thing is to sit down, sketch it out on a piece of paper, and then fire up the terrain editor. Now since I'm a lazy dog, I only do easy things, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a sand land. Now in the demo game, if you have played the demo game, you have the zone called Plains, and in there you have a barbarian village where you can run around and you can try and beat up the guard in the barbarian village and see if you can overcome him. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a sand land next to the zone, and in that create a different realm, basically with the same buildings but in a desert environment. So what I need of course for that is sand. So I need a sand texture. Now down here I have this 6 different texture sets I can use when I paint in the world, and what I want to do is I want to use mostly sand. So I take this first texture, press the square, and up comes the load texture dialog. In here you can load different textures. You can have these nice stones and a nice cobbled road, or you can have flowers. And bear in mind, these are only the textures that are standard with the RealmCrafter demo, and these are only the JPEG textures. Now I happen to know that the texture I need is a PNG texture, and it's located as a PNG as sand. So here we are. That's my sand texture. Now of course it would be extremely boring to just have this and it wouldn't look much like a game, so what we're going to do is we're going to throw in some dunes now and have it look a bit more like a desert with dunes. For that we need the brush tool, which is the red circle here, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to scale up my brush size, as you can see, set the brush speed a bit down, and now I'm going to start to model my world. I press into edit mode, select raise land because I want it to go from flat and then have some dunes. Then what I do is I right click like this, just paint the dunes that I want. So something like this. Doesn't have to be extremely pretty. Of course, when you are doing this, you would pay much more attention and you would make it much prettier, and you wouldn't select a desert, that's for sure. What you want to do is challenge yourself when you do these things, but for this tutorial I'm just doing some minor stuff, so you can get on with the important stuff in creating your own game. This is just for showing you how the game how you can expand the game and how you can use the RealmCrafter game engine. Okay, I made my dunes, not particularly big, so what I can do is I can just scale them up a bit more. Again, I just right click like this and basically just paint my dunes in. Okay, now if you look here, you see seams within it. Let's see if I can find one. A seam, yeah, you can see over here that this is a pretty nasty seam, that it's almost rectangular. Now there's one thing when you start creating your own game world and start creating your own games that is very common rule when you start creating zones and start creating worlds, and that is that there are no straight lines in nature. So of course it looks strange when you have a totally strange line and you have these seams. So to get rid of them, what you do is you press edit and smooth. Bang. Now all your world has become a bit smaller, but it doesn't have any seams anymore. So what you do is you just raise your land a bit. Just gonna put up the brush speed a bit more. Raise your land a bit more. See? And you go into edit and smooth it all out afterwards. Okay. So now for reference to see how is the scale of your things, how are the scale of your things, what you do is you place a model in there. So first I'm going to load a model, and for this I always use the human model because basically that's what the player is going to see in game. So I select this model. Let me just show you how I do this. I press load model in the model dialog, press actors, barbarians, and I use the male model, accept, and I right click, and down there is our base model. So now you have the general scale and the general feel of your world seen from this point of view, seen from the player's point of view. Now when you look at this sand texture, it doesn't look like much like sand. It looks more like, I don't know, an old sponge or something like that. So what you do is you scale the texture down. If you have more textures, you just press this button, and so you scale all textures down simultaneously. So now I scale the texture a bit down, and it looks a bit more like sand now. What you also can do is you can put in another texture. Press edit, press paint, put the brush size a bit down and the brush speed a bit down, and then you start painting on top of it, and you scale that texture a bit down again. Oops, a bit up. Let me just put the brush speed down. This way you can, that was a bit too much. This way you can have blend the textures into each other. Okay, so but I'm just gonna put in a bit more sand here. It was a bit too much stone for my liking. Okay, so it's not a piece of art, but for this tutorial it'll do. So what we also want to do is we're going to take a model, load this model, and what we want to do is we want to put a building in. And we go into the village and we take the barbarian house. Let's see, we take the chief hall, put that in here. And look at here, we have a massive G-fall. So what we do is we go into the model, move and scale option. This one scales proportionally your model down. This one you can tilt your model, rotate your model, move it left, right, up, down, and scale the x-axis, y-axis and z-axis, but this one does it proportionally. So what I've done now is I've taken, oops,